Welcome to the Two Old Guys Talking podcast. Today, the Two Old Guys interview author Anita Wladichuk.
The purpose of this story is to reach out to as many people as possible, to inspire and encourage those who have also been unfortunate to have experienced unfair adversity in their life. I dedicate this rose to all of you. Each time you look at this rose, remember there is someone at a distance always looking out for you, who has suffered or is currently suffering too, who needs help to unleash the pain, silence, and dark secrets within, who has to make choices. I cannot make any promises or guarantees about the choice that you make, but I hope that through this story you can see the light at the end of your own tunnel, because that light is there, and all you need to do is reach out to it.
We're going to be grilling you so hard, your mouth is going to go dry, and it's going to be so much pressure, Anita.
Yeah, it feels like it already.
Okay. Well, it's probably pretty good that we've done a couple of those coffee things, because it'd be really awkward on the first one.
Okay, lights, camera, action. Today we get to talk with Anita Wladichuk. She is author of the book Anastasia and the Ghostly Owl, The Choice Was Hers. She has degrees in secretarial and administrative studies and psychology, as well as a Bachelor of Education degree. She is the mother of two and an experienced dancer. Anita, welcome to Two Old Guys Talking.
Thank you very much, Two Old Guys Talking.
Welcome,
I really
Anita.
appreciate you bringing me on your show and having me share my story and my book.
Okay, that's great. Anita, the book, Anastasia and the Ghostly Owl, at first glance, it would appear to be a children's story, but that really isn't the case, is it?
That's a good question. Yes and no. It would be very difficult for young children to read it because of the way I've written it with all of these metaphors. But also I have a philosophy that I say don't underestimate a child, because they are much smarter than you think they are. And they do have life experiences that you don't know about. So they may not catch every word or everything I write about in the book, but they may end up catching a fair amount. Also, I look at the book as an educational tool for parents, so they can read the book to a child. They can question the child and have the child say what they think is being said on it. And then the parent can also teach the child how to set boundaries based on what is written in the book.
When you were writing it, were you consciously trying to gear it towards any particular demographic or age group?
No, it was actually written for everybody, and I found that it was helpful for children right up to the elderly.
And would you mind if I sort of gave a hint as to what the underlying subtext of the story is?
No, I don't.
It's about child abuse, isn't it?
Child abuse and violence, but in the book, when you read it, it doesn't come out that way in all of these raw graphic details. It comes out into metaphors, so that you have to think outside of the box and you have to read between the lines.
I've read dozens of reviews of the book, and they all seem to be very positive and encouraging. So I think you've probably nailed a certain market quite well.
Yeah, I believe I did. The one market that I nailed right at the beginning when I wrote the book was the organizations that were looking at preventing child abuse.
Because of the book, Anita, I'm going to assume that this has a very personal connotation towards you. That how much are you speaking from experience?
Good question. Probably about 100%.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your childhood if you want to.
But my childhood was actually a very horrific childhood. I was raised in abusive homes. I was put into foster homes by the time I was 7. I was put 2 foster homes. I was abducted by an abusive alcoholic father. He was very abusive. He was very violent. So I spent 5 to 6 years with him, and the abuse. I had to live with the abuse there. And then I was abducted by my mother, who in turn, she was physically and verbally and emotionally abusive. So that was part of my childhood. And based on what happened in my childhood, that's why I wanted to become a psychologist. And my attitude was that I wanted to make a difference in a child's life.
Okay, great. With regards to your parents, it sounds like your parents were separated because you said that you were taken by one and then the other.
Yeah, well, first I was put into 2 different foster homes. And then from the foster homes, I was abducted by my dad and put into Uranium City, Saskatchewan with him and his, I call her my stepmother. I ended up in Saskatchewan for 5 to 6 years.
And I'm curious, Anita, about the, I read the book. I didn't read the reviews though. And I'm just curious. I mean, when you're a writer, you've kind of got a target and you want to reach that target. Do you think that the people who sent you reviews, that the book resonated with them because they have similar experiences, and whether somebody who doesn't have that type of, didn't have such a horrific rearing, would the book resonate with them the same, or would they not quite get what was going on in the book? Do you need that kind of background for the book to resonate?
I believe most people go through adversity in their lives, which is why the book resonates with most people. It's not just about child abuse. It's about, like, child abuse is adversity. Adversity, I also look at a separation, a divorce, a death of a child. And there's a lot of things that can happen in your life that brings adversity. You get those feelings, the hurt, the pain, the grieving.
You mentioned earlier about, the book, you wanted it to reach a young person and parents. So in the crafting of that message, what would be the message in that book for the child versus the parent reading to the child?
We still live in a society where we teach our children stranger danger, when that's not what we should be teaching them. We should be teaching them the boundaries within our own families.
Okay.
The boundaries with our families, our friends, and, like our own tight-knit community. Not this stranger danger thing, because that's not relevant. What's relevant is teaching the children, and that children know what the boundaries are. Now, my book helps to bring that message across, like boundaries.
Okay.
Boundaries of abuse, right? Like my boundaries were crossed.
At what point did you realize, though, it wasn't normal? Like, Anita, I had kind of a rough upbringing too, and it never occurred to me that was anything other than the norm. You kind of just assume, well, that's for everybody. At what point did you go, wait a second here, this is not normal?
It's taken me forever to come to that conclusion.
It does, doesn't it? To this day, I'm going, that was really bad. That was really weird.
It was really bad, but you grow up thinking that that's normal. That's
Yep.
life. You don't know what life is outside of that. You don't know what it's like to grow up and have good parents and brothers and sisters, and you don't know what it's like. You have no idea. So you think, oh, I guess this is normal. This is my normal. This is my normal.
But as a child, you must have sensed at some level that at least the physical abuse was wrong.
Yes, I did feel that it was definitely wrong. It was very painful and hurtful and shameful, and you felt guilty, and you had all these feelings that you had to deal with.
Did you have brothers and sisters around you at the time, or how did they feel about things?
No, they weren't there at the time. We were all put into foster homes and boarding schools. And
so your father, it was just you living with your father? And
myself,
and
my younger sister.
And your younger sister, okay. Did you ever discuss with her any of the things that were going on when you were a kid?
No, we lived in the wilderness, so we escaped from it all.
Right.
We went running around. We didn't talk about things like that. We just went running around in the wilderness and in the creeks and up the hills and just had fun. That was our normal too.
And I think a lot of listeners won't realize you're literally talking about wilderness here. The place that you're referring to was so remote. It's now literally a ghost town. Like it wasn't that big. It was really far north. So you really, when you say escape, it's not like you went down to the mall.
No. We would escape up on the hillsides and the creek sides. And
the bio in your book says Uranium City. I looked that up, and it's pretty far north.
That's right. Yeah. I was proud to live way up there when I moved down to Ontario. I was proud. I used to live way up there.
And you were with your dad and your sister and your stepmom.
That's correct. And then my brother came into the picture.
In Uranium City?
Yep. But he wasn't there for long.
You're in this abusive relationship with your dad. How was your stepmom?
Oh, she was abusive too.
She was?
Yeah.
And how did you eventually get out of that predicament?
Well, we got a trip back to Kirkland Lake, Ontario. And my mother, I guess, had been informed that I was going to be there and my sister was going to be there. And my stepmother arranged for me to go visit her. So I got abducted again.
By your mother?
Yep.
Okay.
This time by my mom.
Okay.
Everybody liked to abduct me.
Okay. So how old were you at that point?
Oh, I believe I was 13, 12.
13. Okay.
12.
And were you then with your mom from that point on?
Yes.
Okay.
My dad came back to try to get me, but I refused.
Okay.
I was so afraid of him. I wouldn't go near.
And your sister was with you at the time, was she?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you have friends outside the family?
In Uranium City?
Where? Yeah, well, even there, sure.
Uranium City? No.
Okay.
The
So
whole-
that wouldn't that magnify it, Anita? Like remember I was asking earlier about, at what point in our lives do you go, that was not normal? Horrendous is one thing, but realizing that it's bad, but realizing this isn't even normal, you don't get the contrast. Like when you go over to a friend's house and you see how that family interacts, which might clue a person in at that point, but the isolation of the community, would magnify the sort of the how sort of that realization, that light bulb going off where, hey, something's got to change here.
No, I didn't have any friends up there. I mean, the whole town, everybody in the town knew that my dad was an abusive alcoholic. So nobody was allowed to come to my place.
Okay.
So I had no friends.
All right. And so your mother ended up kidnapping you, essentially, and you ended up living in Kirkland Lake, Ontario. And
No.
is that no?
No, I went to Kirkland Lake, Ontario for a visit.
Uh-huh.
My mom was told that I would be there, and I was told to go visit my mom, and I did, and I didn't come back.
Was there ever any closure between you and the people that abused you? Well, I guess accountability would have been nice too, but was there ever any point where you were able to tell them how you felt?
My dad, no. I just I did the closure within myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I never. My closure with my dad was not ever seeing him again,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt fine about that. I didn't like him. I was afraid of him, and my closure was just forgiving him for everything he did to me, and moving on.
Mm-hmm.
How was your relationship with your mother after that? I mean, I'm assuming that your mother kidnapped you because she realized the situation that you were in, and she wanted to do better for you.
Yes, my brother who lived up there ran away. You could say that he rescued me from my dad, and he found my mom, and he told my mom what my dad was doing.
I see.
And
At that
my
point,
brother had been so abused as well. She didn't know whether to believe him or not, and she asked me whether these things were all true, what he told her. And I felt quite shameful. I didn't want to tell her, but I told her, I said, yes, that what my brother told her was all true.
The character in that book is some sort of there's an element of mirroring in your own life. Is there a point in the book where you believe your protagonist gets some closure?
I think I start off with closure when I do the identity of who I am.
Mm-hmm. So the book is closure. That beginning to end is coming to terms with, it's quite descriptive right from the beginning. So is that the overall message in the book? Is seek closure?
My intent was to write the big question is what happened, without saying what happened in raw details.
Yes.
Yeah, you did that well. You certainly have to read between the lines, but it's there.
Then you have to think outside the box.
Right.
So, and I use Oprah's quote that the question isn't what's wrong with you. The question is what happened to you. So I believe what I'm addressing is what happened without coming out with all the raw details of what happened, and not saying that there was something wrong with me,
Right.
Because I didn't believe that there was something wrong with me.
Right. You must have had, when you ended up with your mother then, there must have been some, emotional baggage to go along with that. And you were still a young teenager. And how did you deal with that? Was there, you ended up going to university and getting a double major. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So you must have overcome a lot emotionally from the time your mother abducted you to the time you entered university. There must have been some, emotional growing and reconciliation. Maybe that's not the right word, but certainly some growth and coming to terms with what had happened during that period.
Well, when I did come to my mom, I did have a lot of baggage, a lot about everything that had happened to me. My current situation, living in the home that I was living, like with my mom, that was all baggage. I had so much baggage. But what I did was, I was around 16 years old, and we had what was called a rapport house in Brampton, Ontario, where I lived. And I started going there from grade 9 until I graduated till grade 13.
I didn't catch that, Anita. It was what kind of house?
It was called Rapport House.
Oh,
It was
rapport. Okay.
Rapport House. It was a home where young people could go that were troubled, like either on, drugs, alcohol, homeless. They needed help.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed help. And my friends actually took me there.
I was just going to ask you that. How did you find your way there?
Well, my friends took me there. They knew about it. I didn't. And I started going there every day after school. And
What do you think made your friends think you needed to go there?
I got really depressed with my friends. I'm not innocent. I mean, I was a young teenager too that got involved in drinking, but drinking didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found drinking made me depressed. And I got involved in drinking. I got involved a little bit in drugs, not a lot. And drugs weren't working for me either. Like, everybody was having such a great time with the alcohol and the drugs. And I just got depressed. And this one time, I got so depressed I couldn't get out of it. I got into a depression that I couldn't get out of. So they took me to the Rapport House to get some help.
That's a pretty high level of maturity for a 16-year-old friend to recognize in another friend they need that kind of help.
So, yeah, they recognized that I needed some help, and they took me there. So what I did there was I started talking with the gentleman that was there. And every day I talked to him, and I slowly broke down the barrier.
Mm-hmm.
I had, the baggage. He just helped me keep chipping away at that baggage that I had. And I had a lot of baggage, and I had a lot to go through. But it helped me to talk to him, which is why I kept going to him every day, because I found it was helping me. It was really, really helping me to have somebody I could go to, somebody I could trust, and talk about everything I've been through, what was done to me, what happened to me. And I've worked very, very hard.
And so you basically found this gentleman was an adult, I take it.
Yes.
Okay. And so he's probably the first adult that you've ever interacted with that wasn't trying to abuse you.
No, he certainly wasn't. I believe he was a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Being at a Rapport House. I mean, that's what this job was helping helping, young people, youth out. So
Did you
then
ever?
I grew from there. I talked with him, and then I found that I could talk to my friends, and I started telling my friends about what was happening in my home environment and the abuse that I was going through there, and I found that was all helpful.
How was your relationship with your mother?
Well, it wasn't very good.
No. Okay.
My mother and I didn't have a very good relationship. My mom,
She had to survive your father too, though, didn't she?
she had to survive my father. She had to survive my father leaving. She had to survive her first son getting killed at work. She had to survive losing all her children to foster homes, and the other boys to boarding schools. She had to survive a lot.
Your whole family was broken up at some stage. You have a number of brothers and sisters, and I can see that at some point that family unit disintegrated. Were you ever together as a whole?
I'm going to say we were together, I think, one time. My sisters were in foster homes and still, but I'm going to have to say that were we ever together, like as a connected family? The answer to that is no. And to this day, we're not connected. I'm connected with one sister and her children. That's it. And we're not. Oh, and I finally, after 50 years, have reconnected with my brother. My brother was thrown out of the home at the age of 17 and became homeless.
Okay, and that would be a second brother because you said one of your brothers died.
My oldest brother was killed at work.
Okay.
My second oldest brother committed suicide. My third oldest brother became homeless. That was the one that I finally, after 50 years, contacted him.
Oh, how did that go? How approachable was he?
He was quite approachable. So he was very pleased to hear from me. I was very emotional.
I can imagine.
After 50 years, I was quite emotional. But I spoke with his social worker first. He talked with my brother just to, didn't want to, after 50 years, turn around and say, surprise him out of the blue.
That's great. I mean, even if it's been like 50 years, I'm sure that he was probably very happy to hear from you.
I felt it in his voice that he was really happy, and I was really happy to the point that I was actually emotional. Mm-hmm. And truly, after 50 years, after 2 phone calls with him, both times I said that I love you. Mm-hmm. And I really meant it. It was like I hadn't been away for 50 years, or he hadn't been away for 50 years. And, and it was so nice to tell him, I love you.
So how often do you contact him?
Well, I've only contacted him twice so far this year. I started my contact before Christmas, mm-hmm. and then I called him on, 3 times. I called him before Christmas, I called him on Christmas Day, and I called him on New Year's Day.
Anita, I'd like to back up a little bit more because I find your teenage years when your mother took over to be quite interesting. So you ended up going to the rapport house, and you started to deal with some of the issues regarding your the abusive background. And do you think that is how you ended up getting to the point where you could actually take on a double major at university? That is no small feat.
It's not a big feat. You set a goal and you go after it. You persist, you have perseverance, and this was my goal. I'm going to go to university.
Okay.
I actually took a risk. I only applied to one university. They could have turned me down and said no, and then I wouldn't have been able to go to university.
It was a lot of work. A double major is, as I said, no small feat. So why did you decide to do that?
Well, I had to take secretarial and administrative studies to get work.
Okay.
Because I had to work in the summer because I had to pay a certain percentage of my own education. I was given a loan and a grant to do my education, but I also had to contribute a certain percentage. So I needed that degree to get summer employment. I took the psychology degree because I wanted to be a psychologist. And I did it together. And yes, the dean at the university even told me that what I did had never been done before. And he said that I wouldn't be able to do it. He told me I wouldn't be able to do it. It would be so difficult. And it was extremely challenging.
And must have been very satisfying when you finally did graduate.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's like I achieved the impossible. And they say there's no such thing as impossible. You take off the IM and you've got possible.
What did your mother think about all of that?
Oh, she was pleased. My mom was pleased. My brother was pleased. He was very proud of me that I went on to university. And
how did it work out in terms of getting employment?
Oh, I had such good skills in the secretarial and administrative end, so I didn't have a problem getting employment in those ends. The problem that I had was I used to have, I put it back on, I used to have my degree also in psychology on my resume. And at that time, people would say, oh, so are you going to analyze us? Like, a degree in psychology was frowned upon at that time.
In terms of you being a woman?
No, just in terms of psychology. Psychology, means you're analyzing people, and I don't know. People seem to be afraid of people with degrees in psychology.
How did your career go from that point?
Well, it went well until I decided to have my children. I had my first son in 1987. And then from there, I decided to stay home. And then I had my second son in 1991. And then from there, I had decided I started going back to school, but through correspondence to get my Bachelor of Education degree. I still wanted to make a difference in a child's life.
You decided to stay home to raise your children.
Yes.
And what was the conscious reasoning to do that? Because you have the degree in administrative and secretarial skills, and you have a degree in psychology, but yet you decided to stay home to raise your kids.
A couple of reasons. I worked out financially with my ex-husband that I didn't need a $300,000 house, because if I got a $300,000 house, that means I would have to work. So I settled for a fix-em-up house.
Okay.
That would allow me to stay home with my children. That's why I did that. So we agreed on this fix-em-up house, and I stayed home. I did the fixing up, and I was able to stay home with my son because my husband, or my ex-husband, was making enough money to allow me to stay home. The other reason was I was a very protective mother, and I couldn't have my children looked after by anybody but me. I had to make sure that I was there to watch for their safety.
Well, I got a question then, because that kind of ties into something I've been thinking about here while you were talking, Anita. anybody who's had even a fraction of your background experience, like the horrendousness of abuse, those seeds get planted in our lives, and they're never go away. There's always the tendrils are there trying to creep into our lives every minute of the day. Some people just get tsunamied by it and it overwhelms them, and others learn. I guess my original thing I was going to ask you was, I always say that there's a little muscle inside of all of us called the suck it up muscle, and some of us end up with stronger ones than others. And sometimes, you can get tsunamied by it and you can't handle it. But some people, when they have the adversity that you've had, they develop just different life skills, and they can, in my experience, they can be beneficial and they can be negative. So when as you've gone through your life and all the challenges, in fact, like not just before, but probably especially after you were able to extricate yourself from that, what kind of strategies do you use, or would you recommend to people with that kind of background to to fight them back? Like when you go and this is affecting how I'm being a mother, this is affecting how I'm being a spouse. How do you keep it from going too far and being the person you want to be, the person that you're describing in the Ghostly Owl, your book?
I worked very hard for many, many years through a lot of counseling, a lot of different counseling, to overcome, to heal, to overcome a lot of the abuse that I had gone through. They say, you can't change the past, but I did a lot of things when I was going through all of this, playing games. As I said, the wilderness, like going out and being in the wilderness was my escape. Talking with people. I was actually an inspiration to my friends in high school when I started talking with them. And I saw that I could make a difference. I could help others. And that was my goal then, was to help other people. And
was that in part because it helps you?
Oh, yes. It's just, if you could save one person's life, that would mean the whole world to you, I would ask you. And to me, if I could make a difference in a person's life, and that's probably part of what I'm trying to say in the book too, is just hang on to life, right? I mean, I feel better knowing that I've made a difference for somebody, and especially children. My quotes in the book is the fact that children are our future.
Anita, at what point did you think that you might wanted to write a book?
I started writing it in March of 2005. My stepfather had passed away, and that was the trigger.
You had a good relationship with your stepfather?
Yes, I guess I did, because it was such a shock to get the phone call that he had passed away, which it's more of a shock when you're not expecting it. I mean, it's a shock when you're even expecting it, but when you're not expecting it, it comes as a pretty big shock. And it triggered me into writing that book.
Out of curiosity, how long did it take you to write the book?
From March, and then I completed it by right through to publishing by December.
Well, it certainly seems to have got a lot of great reviews. And what sort of, how does if somebody is interested in purchasing it, how do they go about
that? Well, there's a number of ways they can purchase it. It's on my website, www.ghostlyOwl.com.
Okay.
It's available and all versions are available at my website.
What would that be? You can get a hard copy version?
Audio book version, there's a EPUB ebook version, there's a PDF version, and all of those are $5.99 each. And then I have a hard copy, and the hard copy is $11.99, but you get author's signature and the audio version format free.
What about the electronic book formats? Can I buy it on iTunes Bookstore and Kindle?
I got mine on Kindle.
You got yours on Kindle? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I said Kindle and
Okay,
the
there
Apple
we go.
book.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Anita. I hope it hasn't been too difficult. It certainly has been interesting. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, John. I appreciate you wanting to share my book.
It's great. It was great, Anita. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
Chapter 10, Self-Identity. Like a snail, Anastasia gradually began to emerge out of her magnificent shell. She had metamorphosed into an owl. She discovered she had vocal cords. She knew how to use them, and she began to use them to ask the many essential questions she needed to know concerning her future expectations. To retrieve the answers to her questions made her feel she was a ping-pong ball in a department store, searching for the right associate to find the item she was looking for. Anastasia's first objective entailed her educational goals. With all